The Virtue of Selfishness is a hell of a title, no? Ayn Rand is usually not considered a philosopher, especially by other philosophers, but her version of egoism is by far the most popular modern version. She's a great writer, and you'll see it with some of these quotes. Fans of Ayn Rand will likely focus on other works, such as Atlas Shrugged or Fountainhead, but those are fiction novels and not her most philosophical work. Ultimately, Rand argues against the moral skepticism that was dominant in her time, while also conceding no ground to the deontologist or the utilitarian. Rand thinks that her revamped version of virtue theory stands up better. In that regard, she took inspiration from a number of sources, but the clearest and most cited ally is Aristotle, and her opposition was regularly Immanuel Kant. Rand's starting point is unique as compared to utilitarianism and deontology. She thinks that all the modern ethicists get this wrong. The first question is not what particular code of values should man accept. The first question is, does man need values at all, and why? This is the metaethical grounding for the rest of her philosophy. She continues by saying, most philosophers were not concerned with discovering ethics' metaphysical cause or objective validation, but their attempts consisted of trying to justify them on social grounds, merely substituting society for God. And this is super important in understanding her rationale. A mystic might say that the standard of good is the will of God, but she interprets all major ethicists of the Enlightenment as simply replacing God with society. When we look at other philosophical systems, they all seem to be very close to this reconstruction of their claim. Utilitarianism is pleasure of society, deontology is the universalized will of society, and moral skepticism is just openly admitting that it's culturally adopted. And she thinks that the overarching theme of these philosophies, as well as for the mystic, is whim. And the battle is only over the question of whose whim, one's own, or society's, or the dictator's, or God's. If you wonder why the world is now collapsing to a lower and ever lower rung of hell, this is the reason. I told you she has great quotes. To get at the correct foundation, we must avoid whim and look for what value means. Value is that which one acts to gain and or keep. This implies an alternative where something could be lost. Quoting her own character in Atlas Shrugged, she says, "The existence of inanimate matter is unconditional. The existence of life is not. It depends on a specific course of action. It is only a living organism that faces a constant alternative, the issue of life or death." Her example is that of an immortal, omnipotent, indestructible robot which can move and acts as it wills, but cannot be changed, damaged, threatened, or killed, and it needs no food or fuel. This entity would have no values because it has nothing to gain or to lose. A plant, however, needs things to live, and in a very real way, we can say that certain things are valuable to it. And I can recognize this despite those same things not being valuable to me in the same way. The correct foundation, therefore, is life, and there are two relevant factors to staying alive: fuel and or food, and using that fuel properly. What does proper mean? The standard is the organism's life. No choice is open here. What is proper is determined by the organism's nature. So the plant can't simply decide one day that it's carnivorous. Its values are set. How will we know what is proper? Your body already contains a mechanism for this: pleasure and pain. Pleasure and pain are not good in and of themselves, but they are indicators of what is good and bad for you. Of course, your species is also going to matter here. The various ways to survive are going to be different depending on whether you can gather fuel automatically, whether you can rely on your sensations alone, or whether you need to choose to gather and use concepts. For man, the basic means of survival is reason. Man is free to choose not to be conscious, but not free to escape the penalty of unconsciousness, destruction. What this means is that our animal sensations are insufficient. A dog will know what is food and what is not by smell, but humans can only sense when we're hungry, and we won't know what's safe to eat without thought. We must think, and we must think well, or we die. As a quick summary, your values will be human values. These are objectively the only ones you could possibly have. These are not concerned with mere physical survival, but with the survival of the whole human, body and mind. And all this might seem innocuous and attractive at first, but her philosophy is very controversial for a few reasons. The standard of value is your own life, individually. This means that others do not matter. These values are objective and real, but they're not shared communally. Your life is individual, and so are your values. This is called egoism. Rand's specific version is called objectivism. Rand's conclusion is this: there are three human values that lead to three human virtues. Reason, purpose, and self esteem are the values, and rationality, productiveness, and pride are the virtues. Rationality is the source of man's survival and the source of the other virtues. Productiveness is the central purpose of life, which integrates the other virtues. And pride is the result of successful productivity and ambition. The last thing to note is her dedication to reason and individualism. Some people choose not to think and survive anyway, but they do so by imitating and repeating, like trained animals, those that do think. They are the men who march into the abyss, trailing after any destroyer who promises them to assume the responsibility they evade, the responsibility of being conscious. If some men attempt to survive by means of brute force or fraud, by looting, robbing, cheating, or enslaving the men who produce, it still remains true that their survival is made possible only by their victims. Such looters are parasites incapable of survival, who exist by destroying those who are capable. If you know what Rand means from her other writings, this ought to deserve a different title than reason and individualism. It ought to be called Capitalism as Ethics. In particular, the brute force, fraud, looting, robbing, cheating, and enslaving part, she undoubtedly has 20th century socialism in mind. She considers them parasites who survive as the lesser animals do, and she thinks it's doomed to fail. Living off others' productivity contradicts these virtues, and so it's inherently immoral. You might think, but what if I need help? Rand would answer, trade. But what if I have nothing to trade? Then you deserve nothing. Wait, you might think, doesn't everyone have dignity and deserve our kindness? Nope. Rand will focus on these virtues: rationality, productiveness, and pride. And if you don't have these virtues, then you don't deserve survival. Survival is your job. Rand thinks the modern description of ethics being a battle over personal desire and collective desire is a false narrative and leads exactly to the reduction of ethics to whim. We don't need power or submission. The issue for both sides of the debate is the same. Both require a sacrificial system. The moral cannibalism of all hedonist and altruist doctrines lies in the premise that the happiness of one man necessitates the injury of another. It would be immoral then, under Rand's system, to help someone else if it comes at your expense. Surely, you misinterpret her. No one could mean that it's immoral to help people. But no, this is the interpretation. This is the way that Rand herself, as well as those that closely followed her, understood ethics. What will happen to the poor? If you want to help them, you will not be stopped. The full quote from Virtue of Selfishness. Parasites, moochers, looters, brutes, and thugs can be of no value to a human being, nor can he gain any benefit from living in a society geared to their needs, demands, and protection, a society that treats him as a sacrificial animal and penalizes him for his virtues in order to reward them for their vices, which means a society based on the ethics of altruism. Altruism inherently benefits the parasites, and especially as it relates to the government, giving people their needs deprive them of the responsibility of being conscious. From her quote in Playboy, my views on charity are very simple. I do not consider it a major virtue, and above all, I do not consider it a moral duty. What I am fighting is the idea that charity is a moral duty. I don't like this. This isn't real philosophy. Why is she wrong? If you can't argue against her, then you don't have a real philosophy either. What about her system is illogical? If it's not illogical, then you should take that rationality and be productive with it. And if you do like it, then remember to go out and not help the poor. Thanks for watching.